because we chose not to do it in unison, Lenny's going to speak my words. Okay, yes.
But this is a wonderful moment, I think, for both of us in terms of being able to give this award to Jen. It's a wonderful occasion, both in and of itself, and also for the memories that it brings back. And it has continuing lessons, I think, for all the students now in the program. Jen is a wonderful person. She is amazing to her family, to her circle of friends, to her fellow students, to her colleagues at Winthrop, now increasingly to the profession as a whole through the journal. A bunch of her friends from graduate school came and joined us for a little meal before this. And again, that's a tribute to Jen's capacities of friendship and of memories. Jen is also tough as nails. She knows what she wants. She can be very determined in what she wants. And these are important qualities for anybody who wants to get a PhD. You have to have a type of stick-to-itiveness, which is absolutely essential. You have to have a good sense of your own values and what's important politically and why you want to do what you're doing. So my first temptation in making this presentation was to simply read again the blurb that you all have in front of you, because I always have had the feeling that it doesn't hurt to repeat things, particularly important things like the fact that Jen's dissertation was awarded the American Political Association Women in Politics Best Dissertation Award. She's gotten many, many other awards over the years. But what you might not know is that when she first proposed doing this book on women's activism and feminist agency in Mozambique and Nicaragua, would it be too much to say that people laughed at you?
Not all people.
They not only laughed and said it was ridiculous, but they assured her that if she insisted on going through with the idiotic topics that she had in mind, she would never get a job anyplace, and she would be turned down by the profession. She wanted to compare what happened to women who were politically engaged in Nicaragua and Mozambique, which at the time were undergoing very radical revolutions and had the most radical political movements in the third world. And people would say, why do you want to compare two radical movements? Why do you want to compare what happens to women in these two different parts of the world? The type of pressure that she was under was extraordinary. Really extraordinary. And she had to do things like learn Portuguese in order to be able to do this dissertation. I guess she was able to brush up on her Spanish, but the extent of preparations that were involved in doing this research, just incredible. So she did it because these interests were deeply rooted in her sense of care about what happens to women everywhere. And she became increasingly convinced that no matter how well one would understand what happens to women in Western countries, that was not the whole story. So she did it on a comparative basis, and she did it with two revolutionary movements because she suspected that there would be certain similarities and that women might not become as well off as the ideology of their movement said they would become. And that was in fact the case. So the book is extraordinary. The book that came out of this is extraordinary, and it is still worth reading even today. I could mention her other articles that came after this, but Peter told me I should be short, so I won't. But I did want to focus on something that might be a little bit esoteric. She's the winner of the Christina Gabriel Award. We haven't even talked about this. This is an award for caring enough to make the world a better place. She also participated in the South Carolina Mother of the Year Award, Oral History Project in 2014. So these, not the usual sort of academic things that most people would draw attention to, but I would like to draw attention to them because, again, this is just so much gem, right? And that deep, loving care for her community, for others, right? And that's what I found doing all the years that we worked together on a constant basis. I would also like to draw attention to something that Jen has done, and something that's come out of the program. And again, I think this program doesn't get enough credit within the profession, and I think a lot of people here, a lot of students, a lot of faculty, really don't know enough about the activities of our alums and some of the things that has become increasingly important will become more important, and that is the new political science. Jen and Jocelyn Barishka, another one of our alums, who is now at Fairfield University, are the co-editors. They just took it over, what, 2 years now, right?
2014.
Yeah. And they have transformed the journal. I can't say that I read it religiously every issue, but I read in it at least enough to know the changes that have taken place in this journal. And there are just three quick things I would point to in this last issue that came out in June. One is a review of a book called Reviewing Political Criticism, Journals, Intellectuals, and the State. And in it, the review, the author of the review, it talks about how new political science found its beginning with the emergence of the Caucus for New Political Science in 1967. So this is part of a whole revolution within the discipline. And it talks about how the movement within political science and the journal after that focuses on explosive topics such as the Vietnam War, race, poverty, environment, and so on. So this was one of the leading movements, and this has become one of the leading journals within it. Secondly, there's an article in here about the New Politics movement the struggle to democratize the Democratic Party, 1968 to 1978. That's the lead article. It's one of the most insightful things I think I've seen in a long time if you want to understand Bernie Sanders and what is happening right now in current politics. So I think it's exceptional for that reason. And the third thing that I would point to in this special issue is a section on a number of articles on something called mindfulness. Mindfulness, right? Not the politics of mindfulness, right? Not mindfulness in some sort of abstract political theory, but mindfulness as a sort of new beginning of rethinking where the individual fits into contemporary society. I mean, there are many ways of being able to put it, but there are a whole series of articles, and mindfulness is generally thought of as really a non-political type of thing. And the articles in here just lay out their political significance. So I would say that this is a sort of new push in terms of the discipline in both a more socially progressive way and a new way of beginning to think about the individual in society. So for all of these reasons, again, I think this is a tribute to the program and to the type of political science that we have been doing here, and to one of our great students,
We will both present Jennifer with the plaque. Crying later on.
Thank you. Oh, we're going to get a picture. Hold on. My photographers are in the audience.
Good.
Thank you. Wow. If any of you have worked with Lenny Markovitz, you can tell by his remarks that he really gets to know his students. Those of you that are completing your doctoral dissertations right now, think about a time in your future where one of your committee members can describe your work that well, right? That really knows you and knows your work. That's the kind of experience I had here at CUNY. Just a wonderful experience. Let me begin by saying how honored I am to have been selected to receive the 2016 Distinguished Alumni Award from the PhD MA program in Political Science at the Graduate School and University Center of the City University of New York. I want to thank the faculty members who nominated me, faculty members who served as my mentors, and the faculty members who helped teach me how to do political science, many of whom are here tonight. Lenny Markovitz, Ken Erickson, Francis Fox Piven, Hester Eisenstein, and so many others in the room. Joyce Gallup, who we saw earlier, Kathy Jones, many, many more. CUNY has amazing alumni, many of whom are in this very room, and are my colleagues and my friends. I would like to recognize the other distinguished alumni who are in this room with us tonight. If you are a CUNY alum, would you please stand and be recognized? Come on, CUNY alums, let's give them a round of applause. I was asked tonight to give a 30-minute political science talk. I think you'll be happy to hear it's less than 30 minutes. When I began to think about what kind of talk I wanted to give, I first thought about the advice Lenny gave me during the time writing my dissertation. When I was writing my dissertation, Lenny's advice to me was to tell an interesting story. Tonight, I'm going to try to tell a few interesting stories on the topic of comparative intersectional feminisms. When I first went to my dissertation committee, and 4 of them are in this room, Lenny, Ken, Francis, and Hester, and I said I wanted to do a dissertation comparing the revolutions and counter-revolutions and neoliberal democratization processes in Mozambique and Nicaragua from the perspective of women and feminism, I was not immediately met with open arms. I was warned about the regionalism and territoriality of comparative political scientists and encouraged to consider Mozambique and Angola, or Nicaragua and Cuba. But I was persistent, as Lenny said. I stuck to my argument that I wanted to do a cross-regional comparison because that would truly show that despite different regional histories, cultures, languages, and other key variables, the same limitations and opportunities persisted for women in revolutionary contexts in relation to state party organizations. The 2 main limitations I identified were, 1, a lack of ideological and organizational autonomy, the autonomy of thought and the autonomy of action, for women's organizations to determine their own leadership, set their own agendas, and analyze their own intersectional oppressions. And 2, the persistence of patriarchal political cultures. The 2 main opportunities I identified were, 1, a chance for women's activism to implement the goals of the revolution, and 2, the struggle to achieve feminist agency to help define those very goals. My dissertation became a book, as Lenny showed. I brought my own prop as well. Women's Activism and Feminist Agency in Mozambique and Nicaragua, published by Temple University Press, hardback 2008, paperback 2010. I'm about as proud of birthing this book as I am of birthing my son. Those creative activities, birthing a book and birthing a baby, are linked insofar as they speak to an ongoing limitation for many women to achieve full equality, citizenship, and personhood. The continuing unequal participation of women and men, this came up in your opening remarks, in productive and reproductive labor. In many ways, the sexual division of labor has been half challenged, right? Women have been encouraged to take on productive labor in the public sphere of paid work without challenging the unequal status afforded to those who perform reproductive labor in the private sphere of home and family. As long as the sexual division of labor and the secondary status of reproductive labor performed in the sphere of home and family remain unchallenged, women's subordinate status will persist in post-revolutionary societies as it does in non-revolutionary societies. I call the work that I continue to do comparative intersectional feminisms. Lenny never liked the term intersectionality. He still doesn't. He thought and thinks that it's jargony. But I continue to use the term because I think intersectionality is the single most important contribution women's and gender studies has made to disciplines like political science. What is comparative intersectional feminisms? Well, first one has to start by defining feminism. The simplest way to define feminism, right, is that it's a belief in and the movement to achieve equality between women and men. But as soon as you define feminism as equality between women and men, you have to ask which women and which men. Which men, for example, do women want to be equal to? Poor men? Palestinian men? African American men? Do women want an equal opportunity to be shot in the back while running from a police officer? Or an equal opportunity to end up dead while in police custody? We would probably not use men of African descent as the standard for equality toward which women aspire. And we are certainly aware of the way white, economically privileged, heterosexual women have been forefronted in discussions of women's movements and feminism. So, our feminisms must therefore be intersectional feminisms. Intersectionality is a visibility project which offers both a theoretical and methodological way to observe the world to examine the intersections of multiple identities, multiple variables, and multiple systems of oppression, and recognizing how they are co-constitutive. In other words, every one of us in this room has a gender identity, a racial identity, a sexual identity, a national identity, a class identity, etc. And every one of these identities is constituted by and constitutive of each of these other identities. So there's no way to fight for a movement to achieve equality between women and men without recognizing all the other inequalities that exist between women and men, and fighting to end the systems of oppression and the relationships of domination and subordination that create those inequalities. This is intersectional feminism. Comparative intersectional feminism simply recognizes the importance of placing intersectional conversations in an international context, and making sure that when one answers the questions of which women and which men, one is seeking to include the women and men of Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, Europe, and the United States. Barbara Smith's famous definition of feminism reinforces the importance of moving historically marginalized women to the center and historically privileged women to the margins, while continuing to be inclusive of all women in the movement. And I quote Barbara Smith. Many of you probably know this definition. Feminism is the political theory and practice to free all women, women of color, working women, poor women, physically challenged women, lesbians, old women, as well as white, economically privileged, heterosexual women. I'm beginning to make intersectionality a household word at Winthrop University. Winthrop University is where I chair the Department of Political Science and I direct the Women's and Gender Studies program. Winthrop University is a public university of about 6,000 students located in Rock Hill, South Carolina, about 30 minutes south of Charlotte, North Carolina. We've gotten some recent publicity because of South Carolina's role in presidential politics, right? As the first state in the South, the first primary in the South. So we hosted 10 presidential candidates this year. We welcomed Chris Matthews and Rachel Maddow to campus, and some of you may have seen the Democratic Candidate Forum that was hosted by MSNBC that took place at Winthrop University. So I'm very proud of that, because I think part of the reason Winthrop was able to host these major events is because of Dr. Scott Huffman and the Social Behavioral Research Lab that he runs. It's a telephone survey lab that it's become the most credible, legitimate source of opinions in South Carolina specifically, and Southerners generally. And so Dr. Huffman's role leading the Social Behavioral Research Lab and being able to measure public opinions of Southerners has helped catapult Winthrop a little bit more to the limelight than what anyone had maybe heard of before. I'm from Maryland, and I lived in New York City for 9 years. I never thought I would live or work or teach in South Carolina. 65% of our students are women, 30% of our students are African American, 90% of our student body is born and raised in South Carolina. Many of whom, and I might even find most of whom, have never been out of the state. Think about that. If I can get my students to see the world through an intersectional lens, I am literally changing the world. 35 years ago, This Bridge Called My Back, writings by radical women of color, edited by Chair Moraga and Gloria Anzaldúa, was published, first by Persephone Press in 1981, and then by Kitchen Table Women of Color Press. In 2015, CUNY Press released an updated and expanded 4th edition of this foundational text, a testimony to the theories and practices of the feminisms of women of color that emerged in the last quarter of the 20th century. Using an interdisciplinary approach of personal essays, criticism, testimonials, and visual art, this collection explores, quote, the complex confluence of identities, race, class, gender, and sexuality, systemic to women of color oppression and liberation. 25 years ago, in her 1989 article, Demarginalizing the Intersection of Race and Sex, Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term intersectionality to capture how race, class, and gender, among other identity variables, interconnect to create the multiple oppressions that Black feminists and feminists of color have been describing for at least 130 years, since Sojourner Truth gave her famous 8-9 Woman speech in Akron, Ohio in 1851. In her groundbreaking 1989 article, Crenshaw focused on the intersection of race and sex and anti-discrimination cases in the lives of Black women. Specifically, she demonstrated that if companies promoted white women, they could not be accused of sex discrimination. And if companies promoted Black men, they could not be accused of race discrimination, even if they did not hire or promote Black women. arguing that a single axis framework was not sufficient for demonstrating what amounted to intersectional discrimination. Since then, a wide range of theoretical and empirical work has emerged in critical race, feminist, post-colonial, queer, and women's and gender studies and theories, utilizing intersectional approaches to understand how the interlocking and mutually constitutive systems of oppression based on categories of race, class, sex, gender, sexuality, nation, ethnicity, coloniality, disability, etc., age, shape the structural and individual possibilities and limitations in people's lives. I've had the opportunity to co-edit a special issue of New Political Science, the journal that Lenny spoke about, on intersectionality for the global age in December 2015 with my co-editor, Dr. Jacqueline Barichka. And there are flyers around I've given you, and I have more if you didn't get one, that gives you free access to that special issue of the journal. If you're not currently a member of New Political Science, we're a caucus and we're a section of the APSA. And as Lenny said, it has a great history, founded in 1967, and this is where Frances Fox Piven and Frances got me involved in the section and the caucus, and I really had a lot of opportunities as a graduate student. Very quickly I was asked to be a program chair and create the slate of panels for APSA. I just found a wonderful professional network among really the leftists of APSA, but not just politically left, not just people that wanted to bring the politics back into political science, which is what Fran always said, but people that really wanted to recognize methodological pluralism, recognize that political science needs to be a big tent in terms of quantitative and qualitative methodology. So I can't say enough about the opportunities that New Political Science as a caucus and section have given to me. So you can become a member, you get the journal, or you can at least access a special issue on intersectionality and see what you think. In this special issue, we challenged our contributors to apply intersectional theories and methodologies to some of the most pressing political issues of our time. The issue includes articles on Hannah Arendt, which is actually written by another distinguished CUNY alum award winner, Kathy Jones. Articles on Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, Intersectional Citizenship, Violence, and Lesbian Resistance in South Africa, written by Julie Moreau, which is probably my favorite article in the issue. An article on sex-selective abortion in the UK, Jihadi Brides, Cosmetic Surgery and Aesthetic Nationalism in Colombia, Policing Transgender Populations, Rethinking Relationships Between the Global North and the Global South, and a piece that tries to argue, though Jacques and I think unconvincingly, about the political primacy of class as intersectionality's binding agent. And again, I have flyers here if anyone wants to access this issue. The issue also included a symposium on Ajmarie Hancock's 2016 book by Oxford University Press entitled Intersectionality and Intellectual History. We hosted it with the 40th anniversary conference of the Southeastern Women's Studies Association, SUSA, from March 31st to April 2nd of this year, and I brought Ajmarie to come in to be the keynote speaker. Ajmarie Hancock is Associate Professor of Political Science and Gender Studies at the University of Southern California. She's one of the most important contemporary scholars of intersectionality, and arguably one of the most, if not the most important political scientists using intersectional theories and methods. In her book, she identifies what she calls intersectionality-like thinking, as early as 1831 in the work of Maria Stewart, a free black woman from Boston. She encourages those of us who do intersectional work to be good stewards of intersectionality and to recognize that while intersectionality is applicable across all identities in a comparative international context, intersectional-like thinking, as we understand it today, owes its intellectual origins to the ideas and experiences of African American women. Two of my favorite examples of intersectional analyses from African American women's experiences can be found in the words and texts of Polly Murray and the Combahee River Collective. In her testimony to the House Committee on Education and Labor in 1970, activist, lawyer, feminist, author, poet, and the first African American Episcopal woman priest, Polly Murray, theorized Jane Crow and the relationship between race-based and sex-based oppressions. This is a quote. "I am both a Negro and a woman whose experience embodies the conjunction of race and sex discrimination. Moreover, in more than 30 years of intensive study of human rights and deep involvement in the civil rights movement, I have observed the interrelationships between what is often referred to as racism and sexism," Jim Crow, and Jane Crow, and I've been unable to avoid the conclusion that discrimination because of one's sex is just as degrading, dehumanizing, immoral, unjust, indefensible, infuriating, and capable of producing societal turmoil as discrimination based on one's race. There are those who would have us believe that the struggle against racism is the #1 issue of human relations in the United States and must take priority over all other issues. I must respectfully dissent from this view. The struggle against sexism is equally urgent. More than half of all Negroes and other ethnic minorities are women. The costly lesson of our own history in the United States is that when the rights of one group are affirmed and those of another group are ignored, the consequences are tragic." End quote. A famous piece more of you may be familiar with is the 1977 Colby River Collective statement. The Colby River Collective wrote one of the most powerfully intersectional arguments 12 years before the word was even coined, right? In a Black feminist statement, Barbara Smith, Beverly Smith, and Davita Frazier outlined an analysis of interlocking and mutually constitutive systems of oppression based on race, class, gender, and sexuality, as well as solutions for interlocking and mutually constitutive liberation. Here's another quote. "We believe that sexual politics under patriarchy is as pervasive in Black women's lives as are the politics of class and race. We also often find it difficult to separate race from class from sex oppression because in our lives they are most often experienced simultaneously. We know that there is such a thing as racial sexual oppression, which is neither solely racial nor solely sexual. For example, the history of rape of Black women by white men as a weapon of political repression. We realize that the liberation of all oppressed peoples necessitates the destruction of the political economic systems of capitalism and imperialism, as well as patriarchy. We are socialists because we believe the work must be organized for the collective benefit of those who do the work and create the products, and not for the profits of the bosses. Material resources must be equally distributed among those who create those resources. We are not convinced, however, that a socialist revolution that is not a feminist and anti-racist revolution will guarantee our liberation." A story, unfortunately, too often the case. By exposing my students to these ideas, to the work of Pauline Murray, the Colby River Collective, Kimberly Crenshaw, Gloria Anzaldúa, and others, I am teaching them to think critically, to see themselves and their experiences validated in their readings, and to open up their minds to the possible. I'm teaching them, in effect, to change the world. That is what I believe we are as teachers. We are world changers, one student at a time. I just want to give you 2 examples. One of my graduate students, Allie Briggs, she also happens to be operations manager of the Social Behavioral Research Lab that's gotten really famous this year. She just completed an intersectional analysis of the Stand Your Ground laws, specifically analyzing and examining the race and gender of victims and the race and